Hey everybody, so my name is Alex and today I'm going to be talking about integrating authorization into your applications. And I picked this topic because I feel like a lot of people have had struggles with this and we're all going into our capstones, and I thought that this would be a great topic to cover and revisit. So first I wanted to talk about the user experience and how logging into a site is kind of the gateway to it, which will set the tone for the rest of your experience once you're using the site. I kind of like to compare it to a bouncer at a nightclub. So, either you can have a friendly experience or a negative one. And so they're the first point of contact when you walk into an establishment, and this goes the same with logging in and authorization. So it's about security, but also about the experience, and it's to work and also be easy to use and well designed. So what are some great examples of good UI for login? I came up with a couple of different ones. So this is a site called Contactually, logo on top, 2 forms, sign in, and then the authorization forms for OAuth for Google and Outlook on the bottom. Also a link to create an account. So this will take you to another page where you can then sign up if you're not already a user, and also makes it really easy for you to authorize immediately with Google or Outlook. Here's another site from actually slide.com that I'm using right now, which is also really clean and easy to use. And this is one of my favorites, which doesn't have OAuth. It's called Twilio. You can see on the top, you have really clean login and sign up buttons on the nav bar. It takes you to one of these pages with forms. Everything is clean and easy to use, and this has a split screen where you can log in, and it has some information about what a big event that the company is going to be hosting soon. So how do we go about creating attractive login functionality in our apps, and how do we as developers make this experience easy on ourselves, and what kind of tools can we leverage to make our apps more interesting and useful? Obviously APIs, which allows us to consume data from third parties, and almost all of which are going to require OAuth authentication to use the data. Google, Facebook, Twilio, SendGrid, and IBM Watson is some examples. And how do we set up our application with OAuth? So we're going to want to do 2 tiers, OAuth and local login. And we want to design clean views, design our routes and schemas, and code our OAuth login functionality. So I would say that we need 2 to 3 views, login, sign up, and logged in. Should have several form fields, 2 form fields for email and password, 1 to 2 buttons for Facebook or Google authorization, and a link to create a new account. And then sign up should also have 2 additional fields for first name and last name. So basic schema definition, I think that this is pretty self-explanatory. Oops. What did I just do? Okay. So how do we define our workflows? The tools that we should use are obviously Node and Express in the back end with Passport as a library. And we're going to be discussing OAuth, session cookies, and password hashing with a function, an NPM module called bCrypt. So our dependencies, which we would need to install. And then the goals would be to log in and persist our user to sessions, secure their information, and use OAuth to enable authentication and to access APIs. So when a user first logs in or registers to our site, you know who they are because they've already submitted their information to your server. And you can use that information to create a new record in your database or to retrieve an existing one. But how do you keep them authenticated when the page reloads? With cookies. Now let's talk about putting the user on a session with cookies. A cookie is a simple text file with key value pairs, and is created by the server, which is why we require it via Express Session on the back end. Cookies are stored in the browser, in the cookie store, in RAM, basically, and that allows for the data to persist across normally stateless protocol like HTTP. So the cookie stores a session ID. And this is an example of a cookie, really basic username. And with vanilla JavaScript, you can create, read, and delete cookies with the document.cookie method, but you probably won't want to use that. So we use Express Session middleware to handle this for us. So Express Session handles all the cookie reading and writing for us. If a new request has no cookie, it makes a session and a new cookie and gives that cookie to the client. Now, when another request comes into the server with cookies attached, the server sees that the cookie matches the session and we have persistence. And session data is not saved in the cookie itself, just in the session ID. Just the session ID is saved in the cookie. Session data is stored on the server side. So here we require here's an example of code snippets of requiring an express session. And the secret is a random high entropy string you create to encrypt the cookie. And we need to take this step because the browser is an inherently untrusted environment. Anyone with access can open it up and see what's stored in there, and so client sessions will encrypt and decrypt all the cookie values. So Passport, as a library that we're all familiar with, Passport is authentication middleware for Node and integrates great with Express and has over 300 login strategies. So we initialize Passport as middleware, and then passport.session will piggyback off our Express session. Now, serializing and deserializing a user is the next step. And we want to save our user in session storage, and the user object may have a lot of extra data associated with it. All we really want is the user ID and not all the extra stuff, which is when we serialize the user, we save session data as just a username. And to deserialize them, we look at a username and bring back all the other details. So here's a code snippet, an example of Passport serialized user and Passport deserialized user. You can see in deserialized user, we're calling a find by ID method off our user's database, bringing back all the information that we stripped away. Creating a local strategy would then be our next step. So a local strategy would involve our users just simply logging in and submitting their data without authenticating through a third party. When we do that, we want to hash their passwords. So every user's password needs to be encrypted and decrypted to check for validity. The bCrypt hash function is one of the most popular ones being used today. A lot of big companies use it. The function takes in a password as its first parameter, and the second parameter is a salting function. And a salt is a randomly generated string of text that we add to the back of the password, which basically makes the password unique. So if there's a lot of users using the same password, salting it will make it unique and much harder to hack. If you can see here, the crypt.gensaltsync method takes a parameter as a number. This is the number of rounds that this hashes itself, right? So if you go 8 rounds, it takes about, and if someone was trying to hack this password, they would be able to measure about 40 hashes per second. And as you continue to go up, and let's say you put 13 in as a parameter, you go up to about a second to hash. You get up to 25, about an hour to hash for each password, and up to 31, it could take up to 2 or 3 days to hash to try to crack this password. Obviously, in order for you to store and check passwords, it would also take you up to an hour for you to check it for 25 rounds. So about 13 seems to be the right number, which takes about a second. So, in the lovely bones, not the book, our instructor gave set the password field in our DB model as a virtual, with a hook that encrypts the password using bCrypt, and then the hash password persists to the database. So the actual password never hits our database before it gets hashed. Upon login, the hash password is compared to the plain text password for authentication using the same hashing function. And this is what the hash output of a password would look like, which is, I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's a bunch of gibberish. I can't really tell what it says. So, next step would be to set up OAuth. And anytime you attempt to log into an app using Facebook or Google or any third-party provider, there are 3 parties involved: the user, the consumer application, and the provider. The user is you trying to log into the app. As a user, you need to register an account with the provider, Facebook or Google, for example. And the consumer application is our app. And as an application developer, we must register an account with the provider as well as at their developer's console. We get back from them a client ID and a client secret, which lets us confirm to the provider that we are in fact who we claim to be. Now I'm going to use Facebook as an example. So with Facebook, the workflow would go that the user would click the Facebook button and we would redirect them to a login dialog. After the user accepts the terms, Facebook creates a one-time access token and redirects back to our app via a provided callback function. Our site then goes back to Facebook with our secret and access token from the client, and Facebook will then confirm the access token was created and our unique ID, and will respond with an access token to grant us a login. Okay, so you would want, using Passport's library, you can npm install a specific strategy that they provide called Passport Facebook. And here, you have your client ID and your client secret and the callback URL I just mentioned. Some routes, and then Facebook will redirect us back once the access was granted. Looks like I'm running out of time a little bit over here. So logging out, of course, once we're done, we want to successfully log out, take the user off the session, and we can achieve that with a simple rec.logout call. And here's some resources for you guys to check out, which we'll go into some more detail. Google especially has some really awesome tutorials on this stuff, so you guys should check it out. Thanks a lot.